And today I will be covering the culture wars, the political crusade in the classroom. For our table of contents, we have the introduction, the historical development and context, the significance to modern education, affected groups and demographics, solutions and dialogue, the conclusion, and references. So, defining the culture war. A culture war is a relatively recent phenomenon over the last 30, 40 years in which liberal and conservatives, often guided by either politics or religion, will clash between one another in institutions, education being one of them, for the primacy of their worldview. While by no means a recent phenomenon, schools, public and private, have been on the front lines of these campaigns against one another. In the previous year, for example, 2022 to 2023, an astonishing 3,362 books were banned and removed from classroom curriculum. A disproportionately rising statistic of these books removed from their curriculum centered around LGBT individuals and people of color. Both aforementioned demographics represent 60% of banned books in between 2021 and 2023. As the political atmosphere becomes increasingly polarized, efforts to consolidate political worldviews within classrooms have become rampant from parental associations and ideologues. So, this infographic from PEN America in the bottom right displays that LGBTQ characters and people of color together represent 60% of those disparaged within book bannings. So, setting up the historical development, the American education system in past decades and even centuries has been seen of having political radicalism stem from it, especially in the university system. One of the most prolific examples of this is the 1968 Columbia University occupation in New York, where left wing students clashed and occupied parts of the institution to protest the Vietnam War. The acts of politically active and radical college alumni, alongside the rise of evangelism in the 80s and 90s, formed an unofficial coalition against perceived inappropriate or vulgar content. The movement takes significant root in the 90s with the rise of Jerry Falwell and parent centric concerned Christian societies of conservative Methodists and evangelicals, who, more than their liberal counterparts by a substantial amount, supported legislation or action to prevent education espousing ideas opposite to them. So, this is when we start to see the moral crusades, the efforts of parents infiltrating through PTA groups to ban books, condemn books, or certain things taught in English and history classes that they ideologically are not aligned with. Sometimes they think it is perverse, sometimes they think it's an example of a political bias, but regardless of their affiliation, we see in the post Reagan era a lot of ideological radicalism towards education. So, the significance to education. The banning of books leads to a significant decrease in available works, especially on difficult subjects or on subjects for marginalized individuals. Historical revisionism and academic culture wars, such as Florida's new curriculum positing that black Americans benefited from learned skills during slavery, whitewashes history, disparages minority students, and prevents uncomfortable yet necessary discussions. Attacks on LGBT students, like the North Carolinian legislation forcing the outing of transgender students, as well as the exclusion of positive curriculum regarding LGBT individuals, attacks the privacy, inclusion, safety, and welfare of these children. The very existence of public schools are threatened as think tank and parental groups embrace school choice as a way to prevent perceived political bias. So, due to the autonomy of charter and private schools as seen in school choice, a lot of people, especially those on the conservative side of things, have seen these schools as the way forward. That is, schools that are allowed more freedom in the way they represent religion or the political worldviews they teach. In general, this is an increasing effort, and we see it in the mainstream with Republican political candidates such as Vivek Ramaswamy and Ron DeSantis of Florida. The affected groups of this are very multifaceted, as when political issues strike schools, they strike from the bottom up and top bottom. So, teachers have come under increasing scrutiny for their lessons, especially in English and history, due to differing views on topics. For example, there have been teachers that have been fired for showing the more graphic parts of the Diary of Anne Frank, or there have been those that have been accused of teaching critical race theory, in which they view the history of America through a critical lens and subject and analyze the racial dynamics that America has intrinsically had since its founding. Students have decreased access to literary, cinematic, and educational materials as a result of disagreement with their content. Minority students are also deprived of relatable or educational material informative of their culture or background. So, in a school, we should strive to have inclusivity. We should make sure that all students are aware of their backgrounds, that their backgrounds are fine in not deploying and having this content for them. It can seem as if we do not care for them, that their opinions do not matter, nor their experiences. For the schools and school systems themselves, as the organized political apparatus of public education, school systems have either had to rewrite curriculum or lose endorsements and donations from detractors in political disagreement. So, with the polarization of education politically, we will see some people start to withdraw their funds or lose their support or generally stop agreeing with public institutions. A big example of this is the Israel Palestine conflict that has occurred lately, when some universities endorse pro Palestinian positions or pro Israeli positions. People on the opposite side of that will retract their endorsement and stop donating funds to those colleges. For the community itself, education in almost all communities is one of the biggest parts of upwards mobility. So, with these culture wars comes school conflicts and the increase of political polarization. So, for the solutions and dialogue, we have to deal with these political issues in school as well as outside of an educational setting in a way that strives towards ending partisanship. On the left side, you will see the symbol for the Nonpartisan Education Review. They concern themselves with ensuring that education is content, satisfactory, and good for all of those involved without care or consideration for political biases, political parties, or political affiliations. As professional institutions, expectations should be raised that academics are both inclusive, conductive of education for all demographics, and apolitical to the best of their nature. Simultaneously, we should raise awareness for minority or disparaged students. All schools, whether or not they are public or private, should include all of their students. They should be courteous towards their background, and they should have lessons and attitudes towards these students which does not make them feel like they are either harmed or do not have a right to exist within these school systems. Being a professional educator means that we do not involve our own biases in education, but at the same time, we understand where these students come from, we respect their backgrounds, and we make them feel included because every single person in the United States of America has the right to exist and the right to a free and fair education. In conclusion, occurring at various levels of intensity over the last 40 to 50 years, the phenomenon of the political culture war and its spillover into public education has left many uncertainties in the profession. As with all facets of American life, politics play a significant part, and with it, partisanship. Both a cultural and electoral phenomenon, the status of public education politically will not be one decided nationwide. As prescribed in the 10th Amendment, the power of education remains vested in states across America, and as the way of those states go, so too will their curriculum. Professionalism and professional standards, however, should be held in spite of current crises, and the curriculum within institutions should reflect legitimate history and information without the involvement of people's worldviews. We are teachers, and there are higher standards for us, as there should be higher standards for us. We should adhere to strict professionalism, and despite the prevailing political opinions we may have, we should not cater, we should not water down education, and we should present it in the way that it was meant to be taught. And these are my references.